Hey, welcome into another edition of the Blue and Gray preview show. We're back from the bye, working through our own technical difficulties. We're a little bit rusty, but we're here. I'm Matthew Bartlett, director and managing editor of the Roost. This is my good friend JP Heath, voice of the Owls, and we're here to talk football because we got a nice break. But I heard the Owls were still working, and we have a game ahead this week against UTSA for the first time in 2 years. So how we feeling, JP? 1 week of rest to get us ready.
Oh, we're great. I made the mistake with Coach Bloomgren Monday night on our show that I said it was an off week, and I immediately slapped my hand because I want to correct you. He did it nicely. It's a bye week. So for me, with apologies to Coach if he's viewing in now, it was an off week. I did get a little R&R, an amazing day of college football Saturday, but feeling great and coming off a bye week / off week, whatever your terminology, with what I think it's wild to say this, and we might have a deeper discussion later, but the number one rival for Rice going inside CUSA right now. They really need a win coming off that bye week, and can't wait to call this one Saturday at the Dome.
Yeah, it's gonna be exciting, and I thought, we kind of set this up. The timing is interesting, right? Because we knew the non-conference slate was gonna be hard, and it was. But you really thought maybe if Rice can string together a couple wins over Texas Southern and open up against Southern Miss, then they'd kind of be, um, I'm sure they'd love to be what 5-0. So maybe not right where they want to be, but in a reasonable position. Now that we're here, the outlook. It was interesting talking with some of the captains and leaders on the team yesterday. Jordan Myers and Elijah Garcia. They both kind of talked about this being a potential pivot point, if you will, for their season. They win this game, and they would jump up. Right now, UTEP is we'll give them a shout out. The Miners are atop the CUSA West standings right now. They would jump up to be possibly tied with UTEP for leads in the West, and one that would be crazy for those two programs to
Yeah.
flop their fortunes like that. But two, with UAB, coming around the corner. I know the coaching staff and the players aren't looking 1 week ahead, but I'm going to look just a little bit ahead, and this game becomes all the more important. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%. We're mind buddies and a lot of things. And not only playing off of the bye, but playing against a team that you recruit against a lot, playing a team that's your closest CUSA rival. And I'll give you credit there. You asked that question that led to Jordan. It might have been Elijah, like about what you were talking about, how they see this as a big pivot point, and it is when you look at it, what they've been through. The schedule is a really tough one for them in the first three games, but they've got a little something going. I think you asked, it was either Bloom or one of the players later on about like getting a streak going here. Maybe Bloom offered that extemporaneous, yeah, that word there. He offered it on his own volition. Off week, I got to learn how to speak again. But this is a massive game. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of the personnel here in just a bit, but the style for UTSA, there's not much weakness. And it's been, I'm just using this term because it's the first one that came to mind. So I don't want to think it's a negative connotation, but it's been a house of horrors. They've done a lot of things wrong in the past few times there where they could have won games. And can they overcome that? And it sets the table up for some just delicious drama coming up Saturday. In my opinion, Matthew, you didn't ask this part of the question, but my favorite or the most underrated city in the state of Texas, San Antonio. I love me some San Antonio, but of course, I hope the Owls come out of there with a dub on Saturday night.
Is San Antonio underrated?
I
Does
think
not
so.
everyone appreciate San Antonio?
Well, I don't have to tell you this, but we were in the age of Austin being it, but Austin's not so much it anymore. I like me some San Antonio, obviously Houston. That probably goes without saying. I'm from the Dallas area. Don't hurt me, Owls fans. Most people know that, but yeah, and part of it is family ties too. Went to San Antonio so many times as a kiddo. Still have some family and friends around there, but love me some San Antonio. Get to go there. It seems like at least two times a year with the way the schedule lines up with the three sports. But yeah, I'm going out on that limb. At least it's a great city. I'll say that to the Chamber of Commerce people so they can take that snippet out and say, hey, the Houston guy likes their city. So,
hey, I like it. And professional transition here. You know what else I like? I
okay.
like that we're have a good chance of seeing August Pete back on the football field
Yes.
this coming week. Bloomgren mentioned going into the bye that this was a time to get right and get healthy. And injury bug has been up and down. I guess after the 2020 season, everything is better than it was, right? Where you lost half your team, it felt like. But yeah, the expectation is right now that August Pete is going to be good to go. Rice will probably have a couple of guys scattered throughout the two deep that were banged and bruised and limited that are going to be more available. But August Pete had the best game, I think, of his Rice career against Arkansas before he got injured and didn't even finish that game with a long touchdown and a couple other, you know, catches he had, one along the sideline, some big plays. So we're going to get into the X's and O's here in a bit, but from a morale, from a logistics of how the offense runs standpoint, how big is it going to be for Rice to get August Pete, arguably their number two to be to Jake Bailey receiver after Brad Rosner coming into the year? How important is it going to be having him back on the field for this offense?
My dramatic close of the eyes. It's massive because you heard that was I usually kind of lay back in my questions with coach in our presser because I've got a whole I guess it adds up to about 30 minutes of actual airtime with him, and he's tired of hearing from me. Okay, but the one I did want to get to that I didn't want to expose, so to speak, because the depth chart wasn't officially out, but I got a sneak peek because I'm a powerful guy, Matthew. Let's just face it now.
The man
But
in the chair.
yeah, right. I knew August was going to be back, and just seeing behind the scenes, like we both have seen, that he has been progressing in that direction. So it wasn't the biggest surprise when late Monday we saw that 88 was back in that X position. But it's massive. And my question to coach was just about getting with Jake, because we haven't seen this combination of Jake Constantine, who has a great sample size. He's been able to spin it, and he can drop it in some buckets. So that's my number one thing. Post tease back to Cedric Patterson, my guy Trey, we had on the show, and he talked about how challenging it's been, not in a negative sense, but how all the different quarterbacks have had different strengths that he's gotten used to. But now that there's some consistency, so kind of branching off what you had said, having Pete there with Jake, getting what this will be his third straight start in his fourth game of meaty playing time. That's huge because it's not anybody's secret that the Owls really need some more punch from that wide receiving core. When number two, one of the greater receivers in the last decade and a half, has been out, and they need a dude like that. And the big question will be is if August can duplicate what he did against Arkansas. And we haven't seen with Jake, August, and a Tui combination what that looks like. We have an idea, but we haven't seen that against other Division I football players that are trying to beat you. Of course, we've seen it in practice, but I can't wait to see how that was my number one thing I wanted to ask Boss, and I can't wait to see it materialize on Saturday against a very meaty UTSA defense.
Yeah, and let's jump ahead and let's go spend the bulk of our time here on UTSA and how Rice lines up with them. I think it's interesting because I was looking at just kind of the raw numbers when you go and start scouting out opponent and just kind of get a general feel of who this team is, and you go pull up and just the stats. UTSA comes in this game 12th in Conference USA and passing defense, and that kind of took me aback. And then, of course, I remember who they played this past weekend in Bailey Zappi, who threw for 523 yards. He'll do that to just about anybody. But you take that game aside, held Middle Tennessee to 191 yards. Other opponents have been in the 300s, UNLV, Memphis. Those are teams that'll throw the ball around. So I would tend to thinking, especially with Rashad Wisdom at safety, probably has an argument of the best defensive player in this conference. I think they might be better than the raw numbers make them out to be, but I think it's going to be interesting. We were just talking about August Pete and the Rice offense and their ability to attack through the air, maybe the newfound ability at least. How do we kind of picture this out? Where is UTSA um, contrasted to the Rice offense? Is this uh, maybe a more even matchup than we might have thought going into the season when Rice was not strictly ground and pound, but we kind of thought that that was going to be their bread and butter?
I think no surprise, you're as plugged in as anybody, if not more. You're exactly right, because they have to get some early offense, and I think that could be through the air, a pass to set up the run. They want to run, but UTSA has been stiff. Playing up the two games they did against Memphis and Illinois, both victories. They're off to their best start in school history.
And I'll
Against
interrupt you on
yeah,
that. Number one rush defense in Conference
yeah,
USA. They've
yeah.
jumped Southern Miss.
I was getting there, and then sixth in the nation against the run. So I'll see you and raise you that. So it's going to be tough to do that. That's why I think having Pete back in a matchup like this, where you pass early, hopefully you get a turnover or two, and you cannot give the ball to them. On their defensive side, they're second in the league and 18th in the nation in 11 turnovers. So a little bit under 2 turnovers gained per day. And I know I'm not, Heath, news at 5. Heath's breaking news that you don't turn the ball over. Well, that's true in every football game, in every sport, essentially. But in this one, you can't do that, because I think the margin of error is much slimmer. That doesn't mean the winning chances are slimmer. What I mean is what Rice has been doing well and better with a Jake Constantine, as I mentioned, having a lot of reps and getting into a good stride, a great stride recently. He's been comfortable with a lot of different guys. They can't get in that back into that corner early in a game where they're down 14-0, having to throw. They want to be up where they can run the ball later after getting that early lead. That is a mammoth difference in those two ways about trying to run the football, that extra guy or two in the box there. That's what the difference makes. So yeah, early on, they've got to be able to get some plays. And we've seen Jack Bradley. He had a career high game against Southern Miss 2 games back. I guess it is 2 weeks back as far as the time we'll be playing. So we've been seeing more comfort with the tight ends, and I think that'll go a lot into. We've seen Jordan Myers, where the running game hasn't been going, kind of the Mike Leach-esque kind of bleeding out there and supplementing the rushing game with those dump out passes. Myers has been good at that his whole career, but yeah, in summation, yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you mentioned the Owls, desire to get back to that running game. It's interesting. Western Kentucky last week against UTSA averaged 5.1 yards per carry. As we mentioned, they threw the ball over the yard, and I think this is something that's going to be a particularly interesting test for Rice, because you can argue that I don't even think it'd be a stretch. They haven't played a complete game yet this season. They've had strong offensive showings, strong defensive showings. Special teams has not really shown up to the degree they'd like it to yet. But what Western Kentucky was able to do on offense is they were able to throw the ball effectively enough that opened up running lanes. And maybe it's a little bit backwards. We think about running to set up the pass, but what we've seen, at least Rice has attempted a little bit and did a little bit in Southern Miss, or try to throw the ball to set up the run and be able to grind the game out there at the end. So I think it's going to be interesting. Rice really needs to be efficient and be balanced. And that's something that we haven't really seen to that degree from this offense yet. If they can do that, if Jake Constantine can just be effective and efficient and complete 70% of his passes for the third game in a row, which is remarkable from a Rice quarterback at this point. If he can do that, and we can get just enough from Jordan Myers, Kalen Griffin, I don't think we've touched much yet on Cam Montgomery and the usage that he's had. Man, what a fun story, going from the little leg scooter to averaging like 6-7 yards a carry. Pretty incredible. So Rice has options. The UTSA front seven, we talked a little bit on the secondary. This is going to be interesting because I don't know if they have, we're just talking about Western Kentucky. Think about like D'Angelo Malone and some of those stars. I don't know if they have maybe a star in the front seven, but you go up and down the list, whether it's Lorenzo Dantzler on the defensive end, Jalen Haynes in the middle, you got Trevor Harmison at linebacker. They just have so many guys who are, I just listed off, those are all seniors, a couple of them super seniors, I believe, who have been here and done this a lot, and have put in the reps and are really, really consistent. So running the ball is going to be hard, but particularly more challenging against a front seven that I thought it was pretty telling that Bloomgren said during his media availability, their consistency and ability to limit explosive plays is going to set Rice up for maybe the toughest challenge they've had yet, if that's fair, or close to it.
Yeah, you said a lot of great stuff there. I'm trying to figure here's his quote. They're not going to dazzle you with dance, and they're not going to dazzle you with dance and not going to baffle you with BS. And essentially that means is they're so technique sound. And I just counted it up just to make sure my yesterday arithmetic was good. 9 of their 11 starters on defense are seniors or super seniors. And they've got 36 players on the roster, either super seniors or seniors. So these are some grown boys. These are some grown men out there. They know what they're doing out there. Most of them Frank Wilson recruits, of course, but credit Coach Traylor for turning this over and flipping it in a really short time. They've got some guys. Monkey, if you remember back a few years ago, Monkey was up there with one of the better linebackers, and he's been usurped by Harmonson over there. But they play really mean in a clean sense. They're nasty out there. They can come at you. Dantzler leads the nation in fumble recoveries. But they're beefy up the middle. Coach went out of his way to give props to Haynes, the big fella. Not often you see a nose wear number 1. It even seems a little more imposing when you got a guy there, 6'2", 300. Haynes, relatively local kid from Wharton, just south of Houston. But yeah, their defensive line. It's the way I don't. Again, to unpack the nuance there, I'm not saying I want to be like UTSA, but I really look at the way they built the team from a defensive line standpoint. And offensive line too, but their defensive line is probably their strongest area of the team. That's what makes them so tough to run against. Yeah, they got Wiley there, outside linebacker. He plays with his hand down at times too. He's an Ole Miss transfer, so they've got some dudes over there.
Yeah, it's not gonna be easy. It's interesting. This is a team that's, I believe Jordan Myers said, is right on the cusp of being ranked, and I think they were receiving votes in the last couple polls. So he's not wrong. It's going to be a tough challenge, but he also made the comparison to the Marshall game and how they went into that game with not much in the way of expectations from the outside, and were able to do something incredible. And they did that without their starting quarterback, no Austin Trammell, no Brad Rosner, no running backs. Like Kalen Griffin was the last guy standing at that point. So maybe it's not a direct comparison, but to some degree, they've been here before, and what they did particularly well in that game, which kind of led them to the biggest upset of the Mike Bloomgren era, certainly, was they relied on their defense. So I kind of want to spin over to that side of the ball and camp out here for a little bit, because I think we've seen enough from the offense so far, even without August Pete, that they can get points on the board, and they're at least to the point where we kind of know what we're going to get, honestly, which is refreshing. But the defense, we've jackknifed between not great outings and spectacular, the way they closed down the stretch against Southern Miss with all of those interceptions. So kind of spinning onto Rice and the Rice defense for a second. Obviously, you'd like 4 picks a game, but real question, are you as confident as I am that we've kind of settled into what this defense is going to look like? It's not going to be that maybe turnover happy. We certainly take it, but I'm of the opinion, I've seen enough from this defense that we're going to get a lot closer to what we saw against Southern Miss than what we saw a couple weeks ago against Texas Southern. Even
100%. There's a reason we get along so well, is we think and not
We
even
are allowed to disagree. We should do
yeah,
that just
yeah.
for
We
fun.
need to just be like those hot take shows on that 4-letter network and do that. But um, the reason I do feel confident, like you do, is the Rice strength of their defense has been their defensive line. 4 of their 5 leading tacklers against Southern Miss were on the defensive line. And how about Josh Piercy stepping in there for KK Orju, who I honestly have not heard if he is on the track to come back, but it's reassuring having Piercy behind him that can be a plug-in guy, and he'd been playing already, but he was dominant in that last game. And Elijah Garcia, El Jefe, as I've been calling him, going back home. Elijah, I'm going to talk to him a little bit more at practice, just one-on-one, to see how many guys he knows. Because I imagine, and he mentioned yesterday with us about going against Frank Harris, a guy that beat him in high school, who's their great quarterback. I know we'll elaborate on it a bit, but Elijah is as tremendous a human being as there is, just so affable, but playing, he's totally different. So I know he carries a lot of motivation going into this game. How does he do playing in a venue he's been in a lot, even going back to his high school days? So yeah, I'm very confident in the Rice defensive line too, with the way Coach Calhoun has been coaching them up. And I don't know the backstory of all the offensive linemen for UTSA, but this Rice, the reason I'm so confident is this Rice defensive line has been so consistent throughout most of the season, even when they were playing up. They did a really good job against Arkansas. They obviously had the tough game against Texas, but there were some bright spots still against Houston. And obviously against the last 2 games against TSU and Southern Miss. But the schedule's evened out a lot. And that's another reason I'm a lot more confident now, is they're not playing the old Southwest Conference schedule, but now they've really shown what I think they will be. And that's why I'm so confident for this game and the 6 that are after this one on Saturday.
Yeah, you mentioned the UTSA offensive line. I think it's particularly interesting because with the COVID, I guess, benefit of that extra year for anyone who wants to take it, they had like most people did, they had a lot of guys come back on the offensive line. A couple guys that were second team all conference, and a couple veteran pieces. But I don't know if I get the sense that, going into the Marshall game last year, they were hyped up as a behemoth of an offensive line that was going to be a challenge. And Rice really had their way and were able to get to the quarterback. And we've seen, I think you could argue that the Texas game still might have been the offensive line's best performance, or up until the Southern Miss game. Certainly in non-conference play, I think they played as good against Texas as they played anytime in the non-conference play to date, which was particularly encouraging, because if we can see this defensive line, create some pressure for Casey Thompson and the Texas O-line, you would think that they'd be able to find some success against UTSA. And I think something that particularly I noticed against Southern Miss was the creativity that defensive coordinator Brian Smith brought with how they were able to attack and get pressure. You got the 3 down guys plus Josh Piercy, if his hand is on the ground or not. They like to mix it up. And we saw some safety blitzes. We saw the linebackers do a couple things interesting. Looks like we might get Desmond Baker back, who played against Southern Miss, but is getting back to full health. So I think the front 7 versus this offensive line is going to be particularly interesting, because what we've seen so far, we haven't touched on Frank Harris a lot. I do want to make sure we get there, because this is not his first rodeo. He's been at UTSA for feels like 100 years now. I guess technically just 4. But he's been a guy that hasn't been able to stay healthy, has had some turnover issues. It never really felt like he was just going to settle in and be the guy. And not only is he the guy now, but he is fractions of a percentage point behind Bailey Zappi for the leaders in completion percentage in this conference. He has been an effective distributor of the football, who went toe to toe and outdueled Zappi to win a football game last week for UTSA. So this is they grow up before your eyes. They say that about the kids, right?
Huh?
We've really seen a maturation from Frank Harris into a quarterback that um, was one of what, five guys that they had in the mix last year to the guy. And I think he sets up to be a challenge for the Rice secondary. Have you gotten what's your read so far on Harris, and how much of this, new Frank Harris do we believe we're going to see on Saturday?
He's a lefty. Like you said, he's been very active. 4-1 touchdown to interception ratio, 12 TDs, half of them in that game against Western Kentucky. I haven't studied the Hilltoppers secondary yet, but you throw 6 tutties in a game. It's I learned that phrase here the last few weeks for some reason.
Look at
I
you
like
go.
saying that, and he can hum it and he can get it out there forever and a day. They're trying to get Lowell Narcisse to be their guy under Frank Wilson, but Frank Harris has come in and really taken charge. Coach Bloomgren yesterday told us he makes the throws when they have to be made, top to bottom. The team is just outstanding, but Harris has been a guy that's led a really explosive surge. He's handing it off to one of their better backs in school history. It's been only 13, 14 years in their program's history, but Sincere McCormick, over 3,100 career rushing yards. The Rice connection, the receiving core, Joshua Cephas, he is the younger brother of Aaron Cephas, who started for Rice a few years back, but Zachary Franklin is a really good receiver. I mean, all these names are guys you remember from the past, and the guy that's been stirring that drink has been Harris, but they have a guy, McCormick, who, again, rusty at math. Dad was a math professor. I was an English major, but I did the arithmetic. McCormick has been averaging, you sitting down, 26 carries per game. So they're going to feed it to him. They're going to feed it to him. Rice is going to get tested. His longest run of the year is, quote unquote, only 22. Not like I could get out there and do that right now, but they're going to pound it to him. It's not going to be like, at the end of the first quarter, he's got 7 carries for 2 yards. Oh, we've solved the McCormick riddle. No, you haven't. They're going to keep going to him. And that's why I think, in addition to the early lead, here I'm the football fairy, just plucking things off the tree. You've got to get a turnover or two early, turn it into points. Yeah, scoop and score. Yeah, pick 6, obviously, if I'm being extra greedy. But just to take some of that crowd out of there and to make them really sweat things. And you don't want to make it easy. Any game on the road, but with the way this UTSA team doesn't really have too many weaknesses, you can't give them opportunities like that. And stopping McCormick and getting an early turnover or two, I think, are two of those big early determining factors in trying to build up to a W.
And you mentioned Sincere McCormick's longest run of 22 yards, and man, I would have been in trouble if we didn't mention Sincere McCormick. He's the best back in Conference USA. Has an argument to be one of the best backs in the country. He is that good, and is going to get used. But I think it's particularly interesting that long. Something I noticed in the UTSA offense is they're just kind of middle of the pack in explosive plays. They are not a team that is going to reel off 5, 6, 20-yard plays in a game. They might get 2, maybe 3. But what they do well, and what I think the combination of McCormick and Harris has proven effective, is they can get 8 yards on every play. Run, pass, no matter, and they just churn down the field. And they kind of maybe the archetype of what we want the Rice offense to be, to just be able to always stay ahead of the chains. That's something they've done extremely well. And it's going to make it challenging if you get to 3rd and 3 and you're like, man, are we going to try and stop Sincere McCormick, or are we going to try and stop Frank Harris in that arsenal of wide receivers that you mentioned? It's not going to be mentioned. So, yeah, it's not going to be easy. And like you mentioned, they just got to stop McCormick, force those differential plays, those turnovers, and get UTSA out of their rhythm. If you can have a game where McCormick doesn't get 100 yards, you've done something. If I'm drawing up, we're making our wish list, but I would like to see that on the board.
Yeah, the Fairies granting the wishes. It's Wednesday after all. And they're also great on 3rd downs, too, closing on that they're 15th in the nation They convert about half of their third down percentages, which isn't only if it's not even first in Conference USA. And they're number one in the league in fewest sacks allowed per game. So I think if you see early, the Owls are getting to the passer, and like you mentioned earlier with Brian Smith, what's the wizard draw up on this one? Getting to the quarterback, I think you'll be able to tell a lot earlier because that plays into their strengths. And add another one on the fairy tree, get them off the field on third downs because they're not. Yeah, you're right. They're not explosive, but and they can keep you on the field a lot too.
Yeah, absolutely. Not going to be easy. It's going to be a test, but man, if they can win this one, Rice has won 6 of their last 9 conference games. This would be 3 in a row. 3 wins, 2 conference wins, kind of sitting pretty to get started off. So it'll be a good test. We got Alamo Dome with a 5 o'clock kick. Is that right, sir? And then make sure where can we scoop in and see you in the booth? That's probably my favorite thing to check out every Saturday, kind of be the fly on the wall in your room.
It's my favorite angle of any game. We're right on the 50. It's inside, so we know we're playing the game. No stinking lightning delays. But yeah, it's a great angle, great perch in one of my favorite Texas cities. But we're on the Rice House Game Day app. We're also on your uncle and your brother-in-law's favorite social media on Facebook, Skateboard Man on YouTube as well, too. We've got you covered. Varsity Network app, if you're an audio nerd like me, you love skipping around to different games. We want you camped out at the Rice game, but we're on the Varsity Network as well on ricehouse.com. You just go to the schedule page and the listen link. So see you over there. Can't wait to get this one. I get more keyed up after a bye week and really keyed up for this one.
Yeah, we got plenty. It's going to be fun. As always, go find everything. We got practice notes coming up at theroost.com. We got the Patreon over there to get you all the inside scoop and everything going on. We got some bye week notes to kind of go through. We're not going to be bored. We got plenty to get to. So we will we'll be faithful. We'll show up again next week, rain or shine, and get ready to talk about UAB. But until then, adios, guys. Rice fight.
Never dies.